Hey Lou, how's it going?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. And we've got 5 people in the waiting room.
Who's presenting today?
Rob McCann from Harrison County.
Okay. I take it he's not on yet?
He is not on yet. I'm setting up my polling. So I'm going to say multiple choice questions.
I don't have enough light on in here.
See. Oh, Rob is there. I'm admitting him. And I'm admitting Brenda. Oh, I just did that.
What's up?
Hey, Rob, I'm just setting up your polling. Are you using it?
Yeah, I might use it. Yeah, sure.
Okay. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
You didn't send me a file to post, did you?
No. Like
okay. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Lou, can you go ahead and make myself and Rob co-host? Hi, Rob.
I'll do that in just a minute. Give me just a sec, guys.
Okay.
I'm going to let there be an E just in case. And save. Okay. So now I can deploy a poll if I need to. So there we go. Yeah, set that. Hey.
I'm working on my video. Give me just a second.
And Rob, I'm going to make you a co-host. Okay.
Did you make me a Oh, yes, you did. Thank you.
Are co-host Monique.
Brenda, your video's not working because they were automatically turned off.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I will turn it on so you can.
Oh, that's fine. However you want to do it.
Oh, I'm stopping the recording.
Yeah, you're recording.
Yeah.
Good morning, Advanced Kentucky AP Environmental Science students and teachers, and really a special student welcome to the students. We're glad you're here to share this Center for Preparation for the AP Environmental Science exam. Today, we're privileged to have Rob McCann presenting from Harrison County High School. Rob is also a NIMSY consultant and is very experienced and knowledgeable with the AP Environmental Science curriculum. I'm the Senior Content Director for Science, Lou Akampora. Also Tina Rose, Aaron Timmons, and Monique Race are my colleagues, and I'll be monitoring and hosting the session. Feel free to ask questions via chat, and if you'll take a moment to just tell us where you're from. I see we have quite a few students joining us. And again, you're all welcome. Just as we move forward, please, your microphones have been muted, and turn off your video, and do use chat. I'll be passing any questions along to our presenter, Rob McCann. As we go forward in this experiment in online AP learning, there's a website that has been created to support you and your classmates and teachers, and is kyap2020.com. The video from this session and other sessions will be posted here, as well as other support materials, including handouts and so forth. As I mentioned, Rob McCann is the Harrison County High School teacher of environmental science, and also works for the National Science Initiative. So I am going to turn this over to him. Rob, if you want to go ahead and share your screen and take over.
All right, guys. Hey, welcome. And thanks, Lou, for the introduction. And hopefully today we can cover quite a bit about human population and just populations in general. So we'll switch over to my screen. You guys seeing my screen yet?
We're starting to.
All right, awesome. Okay. So, as you guys know, the populations unit was unit 3 this year with that course evaluation exam description book. If you guys haven't found it, access to that, you need to, I'll try and maybe share a link for you here. But I'm going to go through the whole thing with you. And then I'm going to go back and forth to the chat box and make sure I'm staying on top of things, okay? And let me drag this down just a little bit. All right. You guys ready?
I think we are.
Okay. Most of the time when we talk about populations, I think students sometimes get confused with this population over here, which are human populations, and the population over here, which are organisms. And sometimes we get those things confused, and we focus maybe our answers on the human component when we should have been talking about organisms, or we're talking about organisms when we should have been talking about humans. So that's one thing you need to really make sure you look into the question on the AP exam, and make sure that you can iron out what the question's asking. Are they asking me about human population and the impact, whether it be environmental or economic, or are they talking about the organism component of populations and the economic and environmental component? Because they're, you know, we can interchange them easily in conversation, but when it comes down to the free response questions, you know, they're going to be specific, okay? And so you need to make sure that you are under control and you know what you're talking about, okay? Just a real quick recap. You guys know that the format of the exam is going to be 2 essay questions. You're going to have 45 minutes to answer the 2 questions. So right now, if you're thinking about, you know, typing and stuff like that, I've been telling my students that you need to make sure you probably have some access to a keyboard, whether that be a Chromebook or a desktop computer or whatever. But trying to say type with your cell phone, even though you guys are way better at texting than I ever will be, it's still going to be pretty difficult for the spell check component and the autocorrect. You guys all, I mean, we've seen all the memes about auto formatting with our text messages, but you need to probably make sure that you have access to a keyboard. I've handed out some Chromebooks to my students. So that's something you might want to contact your host school and see that you have access to a keyboard, okay? All right, moving on. So populations. The first part of this unit talks about a generalist versus a specialist, okay? So what I want you to do in the chat box there, and actually, Lou, if you would, we can poll. Run a poll for us real quick, and you guys tell me how many of the individuals here in the poll would be generalist. So go ahead, and if you want to launch that poll, how many of the individuals in the image here are generalists?
And A will be 1, B will be 2, C will be 3, D will be 4, and E will be 5. And if you think it's 0, I guess leave it blank.
And if you want to look at the chat box, say you're not comfortable with the polling thing, you want to put in the chat box a number, that'll work too.
Whoop, I somehow closed the poll accidentally, or we have 8 votes. And we'll try again. This is probably my fault, or maybe it timed out, but we had 8 votes, 4 votes for 2, and 4 votes for 3.
All right, good.
Oh, no, we can still vote. Sorry.
Still going. Maybe you gave away the answer. That's all right.
Well, I don't know which of those were the answer. I have someone voting for 4. I'm going to.
So we take a look at the picture again, okay? Again, the question were generalist. And so hopefully you were leaning towards the squirrel here in the middle of the picture and the raccoon over here in the bottom right-hand side, okay? Those guys are definitely our generalist, okay? Our specialists become the koala bear, the salamander, and the Siberian tiger here, okay? Using the chat box there, what might be the characteristic that makes one of these individuals a generalist versus a specialist? So what are some characteristics that you might see in the chat box? So type that in the chat box for me. I hear some computers typing. That's always good. All right, so what are we saying here in the chat box? Specific environments, the food they eat, very good. The habitat they live in, good. Their diet, that's also very good. All good answers, okay? All right, so the Siberian tiger here, as you guys probably already know, they have really specific range. So they're, instead of like a generalized niche, they have a specialized niche, the role that they play. The koala bear here, you guys probably are familiar with the whole eucalyptus leaves, and that's what they eat. And so that's very, very specific, okay? The salamander here, this one's gonna be maybe kind of a tough one for you. I don't know if you've seen very many salamanders. They're one of the organisms that are definitely kind of going extinct because they're so subjected to temperature changes. When the climate starts changing, the temperature changes and moisture and precipitation contents start to change, this little guy here is instantly impacted, okay? Now, I'm not that old, but actually I remember as a kid, I could go around my house and I could actually find salamanders here in Kentucky. And of course today, I can't hardly find any of them, especially around my house, okay? All right. So you guys got the gist of generalist versus specialist. Which organisms will do better if the environment changes, okay? Lou, if you want, you can run a poll again. Generalist or specialist, A or B? Which one of them will do better if the environment changes? A for generalist?
A or B? A
All right,
for
good.
generalist and B for specialist, is that correct?
Yeah. So you guys are killing it, all right? And why? The big factor is why. Why is the generalist going to be more adapted? So use the chat box down there. And in your chat box, I want you to put down what you think are reasons why the generalist might do better.
Okay, I'm going to give 10 more seconds for polling. If you want to vote, get your vote in now. 3, 2, 1, and it looks like the overwhelming favorite was A, and that was generalist, I believe.
Yeah, very good. All right, good job, guys. All right, so going back.
And for the Y?
Yeah, so we got all kinds of whys. There were some really good answers. It's really, if I go back to the previous slide, we see the same thing, right? The characteristics that we use to identify these organisms are the same reasons or the same characteristics as to why they would be successful or not successful when it comes to environmental changes, okay? All right, the second content bullet for Unit 3 for populations had to do with K strategists versus R strategists, okay? And so I've got 4 organisms here listed. They've already been identified for you, but I've got a nice pretty tree right here for you. I couldn't tell you what species of tree that is, but it probably maybe a chestnut tree or something. It looks like a savanna type background. But why would this particular organism be a K strategist? So use the chat box down there. And then we have, of course, we have an elephant. Why is it a K strategist? So what are some characteristics of K strategist? Okay, so you go ahead and type those into the chat box for me. And
Rob, while we're waiting for responses, could you, for those of us who aren't taking AP Environmental Science, like your hosts, telling me what is a K selected or an R selected species briefly?
Okay, yeah. Well, you're kind of getting ahead of me because we're going to go over some characteristics in the next slide.
Okay, then I'll wait.
That's okay. I will give you guys a couple of hints. When I'm looking at K strategists, I always remember that the letter K represents something called carrying capacity. So I'm looking at organisms that live in and around carrying capacity all the time. Where the R strategist, the R makes me think or makes me remember rate, okay? So I want to see the rate at which things change or the rate at which they reproduce, okay? All right, so what do we got going on here in our chat box? All right, we've got rabbit, our star, long lifespan, few children. R stands for rabbit in my class. Okay, that makes more sense now. Offspring, good. All right. So down here at the bottom here, we have two R strategists, the dandelion and the jellyfish, okay? And these organisms are going to have several offspring. They're maybe, if you think of quality over quantity, think about that. Where your K strategists, you're going to look for quality, okay? The quality of your numbers. And in the R strategists, you're going to look for quantity of numbers, okay? So if we move on to this slide here, I've left it blank because I knew we were going to have a little discussion here. So if we go here and let's say we print screen, and let's say we go into this particular let's go here. All right, so take a look. I'm manipulating my screen here. You guys are going to see all kinds of things here. Let me try it again. Clicking too many buttons at once. All right, so we'll get rid of some of this stuff, right? Somebody disappeared. Okay, we go across here. We'll delete this. All right, so here are my characteristics. I'm going to slide them up here. And some K strategists, you know, you guys said stuff like few offspring. That was correct. And so the opposite would be true over here for R strategists, you know, several.
We have a long lifespan.
Okay, yeah, we got long lifespan. Okay. And that would give you, you know, short lifespan, right? Some other strategies that you may see in K strategists would be nurturing. Okay.
And that would be parental care.
Yeah, nurturing. If you needed a little quick parental care is the key thing there. Okay. Other things with our strategists, you know, you could think about gestation period. I don't even want to tell you how long it takes for the gestation period for an elephant, but it's a really, really long time. It's way longer than 9 months as the human gestation period is. Your R strategists, again, several offspring, short lifespan. In terms of size, they're very small in size. Okay. And the opposite's true over here, you know, large in size. All right. What's our chat going on over here? Isn't it 2 years? Very good, Stephanie. It is definitely 2 years for the elephant. And here's what's crazy is the elephant, typically the reproductive age. So let's write that down. Late reproduction. That's an even added component to this K strategist. I mean, imagine habitat's lost and it takes 15 years for the elephant to be reproductively capable of having offspring. And so, and you add a gestation period of 2 years, now you're looking at a 17-year turnaround just to get one offspring, right? So that's pretty tough. All right, those are tough scenarios to overcome, okay? All right, we're killing that. I feel really good. You guys know what you're talking about there. All right, the next unit topic was survivorship curves. Let's see. Let's go in the chat box here, and I want you to identify which survivorship curve, type 1, type 2, type 3, which one of those could be identified or described with as late loss.
And polling is open. So A will be type 1, B will be type 2, and C will be type 3.
Okay, so type 1, type 2, type 3, which one's considered late loss?
And we'll give you 10 more seconds to vote. This is anonymous, so please go ahead and
Yeah.
take a guess here.
Plus, you know, if you put wrong answers out there, it makes me talk about misconceptions.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna stop the voting in 3, 2, 1, and share the results.
All right, looks like the majority of you picked late loss as a type 1 survivorship curve, which was A. All right, and that is correct, late loss. So if you're looking at the survivorship curve, notice that the percentage of offspring are 100% here at birth, at time 0, okay, in terms of life expectancy. And notice they go pretty ripe age here before they start to drop off into the death phase here, okay, the descent, the negative curve. And so that's late loss. And then we have early loss, okay? Early loss, let's go ahead and you can shoot your poll there again, Lou. If you think early loss, that'll be letter C. If you think, well, type 1, type 2, type 3 is A, B, and C, which one of those is characterized as early loss?
And polling is open. We only have one vote. Let's go, guys.
I may have actually leaked the answer there and my explanation. So hopefully it's C, isn't it?
That's the one vote we have is for choice C. I'm going to end the polling here.
All right, yeah, there's the poll. I think some of the polls weren't showing up.
Okay, well.
That's all right. All right. So no big deal there. The poll isn't on my screen, sorry. But you knew the answer, correct? All right, so hey, type 3 survivorship, right here, type 3 survivorship, okay? Several offspring are gonna die early on in life. You know, in my class, we usually graph like a frog, some sort of like amphibian, because, you know, amphibians definitely have a strategy where they have several offspring, only with a, you know, a very, very small percentage of them even making it to survival. In the case of the frog, it has an adaptation somewhat in its life where it gets to grow those legs, and it can now transfer over into terrestrial ecosystems and aquatic ecosystems. And so that's always kind of one of the indicating factors, is that some kind of life change happens for these organisms to be a lot stronger and able to survive. Hopefully in your all's classes, you guys maybe did a bubble survivorship lab where you get to blow bubbles. I know that's one of the things that we do in my class. And you guys can actually really, in a neat way, represent these survivorship curves by just blowing bubbles, okay? The last one here, the descriptor, is what's going on in our chat. Okay, I see some questions here. Thank you, Stephanie, addressing some questions. Favorite lab, thank you, Alicia. All right, so constant loss right here in the middle, you see the constant curve. And so that's always your good indicator of constant loss, okay? All right, now, in the chat box there, I want you to tell me which one of these survivorship curves actually represents or indicates case strategist and which one of them indicates R strategist, okay? So go to the chat box, tell me which one of the survivorship curves is a K strategist. So we're in the chat box. Type 1 is K. Type someone already answered type 1. All right, good. All right, go ahead while you're doing a great job. Roll with that and tell me which survivorship curve is R strategist. So start punching in. R strategist, R strategist, R strategist. All right, good. All right, I see some of you have put R strategist as type 2. If I were taking the AP exam and I had to answer and I had to pick one or the other, this is going to be your R strategist, okay? The gray area, because not all the survivorship curves fall into this nice clean definition, just like, you know, R strategist and K strategist, your examples that you may come up with, they don't all fall in a perfect or all the way R strategist or all the way K strategist. Some organisms can actually fall in that gray area, okay? And so this type 2 survivorship curve, that kind of gives us an indicator that there are some organisms that are kind of type 1 and they're kind of type 3, just depending on what the environmental conditions are, okay? All right, so that was survivorship curves. I think you guys are good with that. One thing that I tell students to try to remember what the survivorship curves look like, it definitely looks like a leaf, okay? If you were to say draw it, say I came out of there and I went into, say, Microsoft Paint here again, and I like Microsoft Paint, by the way. I don't know if you guys do, but let's say I were to graph it. All right, so I've got this graph, and then we're going to go across here, right? And then we start looking at our curves. We're going to play with some graphs here in a little bit. And we take that one and we draw that one out, right? Okay, so there's that one. We come again, we come here. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to play with Microsoft Paint, right? And then we draw our constant loss, okay? And that, guys, looks like a leaf, where your type 1, type 2, and type 3 survivorship curves, okay? All right. Any questions on survivorship curves? If you've got something, put it in the, do I think they would have to graph on the exam? That is definitely a possibility. I think what you're going to see is not so much survivorship graphs, but you may possibly see a population graph, like you're given the statistics for, say, a country, and you have to graph maybe an age structure pyramid, something like that, which we're going to talk about today. Or you have to graph the total fertility rate, which I've seen. If you go back to free response questions in the past, you'll definitely see that I think the question was Kenya, and I think the year was 2014. They had to graph Kenya's total fertility rate. How would you graph online? That's a good question. Like they're actually giving the kids opportunities to create data that they can then submit. Okay, so if the idea were them to actually create something or have to graph something, then they would be given the opportunity to create a file and upload that file, which is what we're seeing with the art classes and the I think physics or something like that. They're going to give an opportunity to upload files. All right, moving on. All right, so the fourth content bullet for Unit 3 happens to be carrying capacity. And so we got overshoot and dieback are some big terms there. And so I'm going to go back to our Microsoft Paint, and I'm going to say eliminate part of this, okay? And we're going to talk about the two most common graphs in ecology, okay? That first graph is going to look, so if you'll go to the chat box here, I want you to describe or tell me what curve that is, okay? So go to the chat box. What curve would you, if you had to identify this curve, what is it? I can maybe even add a little bit to you and say population here on this. If you need me to identify labels here, time. See the chat box blinking over there, right? What we got here? Exponential, exponential, very good. All right, good job. So then what if I were to give the other curve, right? And that other curve is going to look kind of like this, and then we're going to draw it up a little bit like that. And what's the name of that curve? So jump in the chat box. Hey, I knew that one. Good job, Monique. Logistical growth. Very good. Okay. Now, I'm going to add something in here. And I'm going to just put a line. Oh, not that guy. You stay there. Let's try this again. Let's go here. All right, so what if I go through this particular line here, and I'm going to make it a dotted line. I'm going to do it by taking a couple spaces out here, okay? All right, so go to the chat box there. Tell me what this dotted line here is going to represent in this particular graph. Okay, well, I'm hoping it says carrying capacity. Very good, carrying capacity. All right, so then identify for me, you know, what's going on right here. So if this particular one here has moved, okay, I'm gonna move it down just a little bit so I can get a better idea of what I'm talking about. Right around here, that particular graph has done something. And so that's where I'm looking for you guys to tell me that there's an overshoot. So this particular population of organisms has overshot its carrying capacity, right? And so that's going to be a problem because that's going to result in the dieback, okay? And so if we're using arrows here, this, and then we label some stuff here, we got overshoot, right? And then we have what's going to be the dieback, okay? All right, questions so far? All right, so my question then to you would be why? Why did the organisms overshoot? Okay, so first off, let's back up. What kind of organisms are we talking about that typically overshoot? That goes back to K strategist and R strategist, right? It also goes back to generalists and specialists, right? Okay, too many births, good. R strategist, very good. Okay, and so, you know, why did they do that? You know, why did an R strategist overshoot? And typically the answer is going to be that's part of their strategy. I mean, they're going for quantity over quality, and their hope is, and this is part of their life cycle, you know, this is their hope that, you know, if you go outside right now, you're going to see an influx of carpenter bees, right? These carpenter bees are just hovering around. You know, they're not really doing anything, but they're kind of protecting their area, and they're trying to be, you know, menacing, and there's a bunch of them. And eventually there's going to be a cold spell, and that cold spell is going to die back, but there's going to be a few of them that are going to survive. okay? And that's the strategy. That's how they live their life, okay? While here, our logistical growth, these organisms live in and around what we would call carrying capacity. So they're typically our K strategists, okay? So our K strategists are going to live right in here, okay? Now, is that a good strategy? Is it a bad strategy? I like to tell my students a couple of things, okay? What is the advantage of living around carrying capacity, okay? And I'll give you a word over here, and it's called competition, okay? If we look at competition, living in and around carrying capacity is always going to breed competition, okay? Because those organisms are going to be competing for resources, okay? And by staying in and around competition, that carrying capacity and competing, you're going to influence this gene flow, okay? And is that a good thing? Is it a good thing to influence our gene flow within a population? Absolutely, okay? There was a famous guy who gave us the theory on evolution. So run over to your chat box there and quickly type the individual who gave us our theory on evolution. I'll give you a second to type that one in. Okay, Charles Darwin. Good. All right, very good. So Darwin gives us this idea on survival of the fittest, right? And it's through competition and controlling this gene flow that you get survival of the fittest. You get the most fittest adaptations, the fittest DNA. You are controlling the gene flow, and that's what carrying capacity is, okay? The other organisms here that overshoot carrying capacity, they're typically, the gene flow is not very strong. It's actually pretty weak. The competition that they have is not very strong either. And that's why those organisms really don't have the adaptations for survival or long-term survival, okay? All right, questions so far? You guys like playing with Microsoft Paint? All right. So we'll jump back on over here, and we see this picture here, and the picture I've shown you here is carrying capacity, and the image here, hopefully you get the image here. The overflow leads to starvation, accidents, pollution, and so on. And then we get down here at the bottom what we call population loss. Okay, now that brings me to my graph again. So we'll go here, and we're heading into something here that's going to be pretty big. Let's get rid of, what's awesome here is I can basically just get rid of everything if I want to. Come in, get my line again, okay, and we're going to do our graph. All right, so I'm going to give you a graph here that's going to show human population, okay, growth. Of course, run to the chat box there real quick and tell me what graph represents human population currently. What type of graph? Ecological graph. We already talked about both of them. Good, exponential. All right, good. All right, so here we go. So I'm going to get our exponential population growth. Okay, draw it out like this. Okay. All right, so there's our human population growth. All right. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to draw another straight line here. And this straight line is going to, let me label something here. Make sure you're following with me so I don't lose you. Human population. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to switch over to my straight line, and I'm going to show you guys food. Okay. Now this graph here is going to represent the production of food. Okay. Okay. All right. And so herein lies an issue, right? So if we go to the spray feature here and we pick the gray, notice over in here, this is the gray area, okay, where food production did not meet population growth, okay? Now, what person in our environmental science proposed that this would lead to population loss? Okay, so there was a famous guy. So go to your chat box, see if you can put in the guy that said predicted that this would happen. He also predicted that because of this, we would get. So here's the gray area. All right, I see my chat box going. I'm going to check it out here in a second. But this would lead to famine, starvation, would lead to civil war, disease, right? All right, so what were you guys chatting there? I lost my chat box. Where'd it go?
Well, I guess Thomas Malthus. And
yes,
I got
very good. So yeah, Thomas Malthus is our guy, okay? But something happened. So go back to your chat box there. Tell me what happened that proved Thomas Malthus or Thomas Malthus couldn't predict this for happening. And I'm going to graph it for you as you guys come up with some of your answers. So what happened that Thomas Malthus could not predict? And it happened, we're going to say it happened right here. And it is growing, okay? So type in the chat box there, what happened? Let me see what's going on here. Thomas Malthus, yeah, that guy, Green Revolution, very good. I see Green Revolution. So at this point, we'll put a little star here on it, right here, okay? And that's gonna mark our Green Revolution. Right? And while we're on Green Revolution, type in the chat box, give me some things that are characteristic of the Green Revolution, okay? You guys are doing fantastic. Synthetic fertilizers, good. Irrigation, good. GMO plants, good. All right, so let's make that, I'll type in some of that stuff for you. So we got GMOs, irrigation practices, fertilizers. What else is coming up in the chat box? The natural GMO. I don't know if they're, what's a natural GMO? Maybe natural GMO, maybe, I think you're thinking of maybe artificial selection. That could be it, okay? Machines, okay, good. The use of fossil fuels, okay? I'm gonna actually put artificial selection. Can anybody name the famous guy who is known for, you know, feeding or saving the lives of over 2 billion people? Go to the chat box and see if you know who that is. That's a tough one.
How did he do it?
How did he do it? He did it through artificial selection, GMOs, and irrigation practices.
That's not who I was thinking of.
You told us in November, but I forgot. It's okay, Brenda. Okay. Anybody? So no takers. Okay. This guy, if you don't know him, you got to know him because he is the father of the Green Revolution. 2 Nobel Peace Prizes for Norman Borlaug. Can't remember how to spell his name. I might have to look it up. Something like that. I forgot.
His first name is spelled like that.
Huh?
I'll bet his first name is not spelled like that.
Oh yeah, sorry. Whoops.
That's okay, Rob. We can figure it out.
Sorry, I'll fix that for you. maybe.
That's okay.
But yeah, so Norman Borlaug, there's a couple books there with him in it, and but he is the father of the Green Revolution. Okay. All right, there we go. And it was because of Norman Borlaug's work. He spent maybe 40 years in Mexico mostly, and he revolutionized this artificial selection. I mean, he spent years in the field hand-picking wheat, the biggest, the best, and fertilizing those. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna draw a different graph here. So we're gonna get rid of all this, and I want to tie this into what's currently going on today. So let's pick this up. Okay, we're gonna get rid of that, clean this up a little bit. All right, hopefully I've given Microsoft Paint new life for you. And you guys are gonna start using it now. All right, so let's go back to our human population. Okay. All right, there's our human population growth. All right. And our current governor, Andy Beshear, has been kind of talking about this a little bit. But we're going to go, I'm going to make another carrying capacity, but this particular carrying capacity is going to not necessarily be the one that you're thinking of. Okay, so I'm just making myself a dotted line here. And I'm going to label this one healthcare. Okay, all right, so this is our healthcare carrying capacity. Now, this next graph I'm going to draw is, it's going to go just like this too. Okay. And we're going to draw it out. And we're going to label this guy. Any guesses what I might label this one? You go to the chat box and put a little guess there for me. Fertility. All right. So this is our healthcare carrying capacity. Let's go back here. All right. Let's move this down a little bit for you. All right. And in green over here, we have our COVID-19. Okay. And so this is what we're seeing in terms of our human population and the spread of the virus. Okay. And it's growing exponentially. And so what we're trying not to do is we're trying not to overshoot our healthcare carrying capacity, because that leaves this little gray area up here that we talked about with Thomas Malthus, right? And the things that happen in the gray area are the things that would have happened if Thomas Malthus were to be true. Things like famine, starvation, civil conflict, resource conflict. That's what's going to happen. And so we need to make sure that we stay within the reaches of this healthcare carrying capacity. So our governor has been talking about flattening the curve, okay? And by doing that with some social distancing. So what's kind of unique is that we see the same thing with our food resource. We see that with this disease spreading, okay? And so that brings me to this question here. And that question would be, what are some population limiting factors. So go to the chat box there and start typing in what are some population limiting factors. Resources, food, water, shelter, disease. Good, because this coronavirus is definitely one that's going to fall in that disease category. Shelter. Good. Some other limiting factors, if you want to generalize resources, but you can also say things like fossil fuel, energy use, consumption. Those things are a finite supply, and they're going to be limiting factors, which brings us back to our presentation. Okay, population growth and resource availability. This was the 5th content bullet out of that particular unit. And some things I wrote down over here to kind of help you remember what we talked about just a minute ago. Tragedy of the commons always plays here because, well, let's go 2 questions. In the chat box, first, tell me the guy who came up with his tragedy of the commons, and then give me a short explanation of what the tragedy of the commons would be. Then we've already talked about Thomas Malthus, so you're in the chat box. Get over there, start typing some stuff. How many people can have babies? Healthcare, abstinence, good. The one slur, good. Thanks. All right, so remember our tragedy of the commons, the individual who wrote the essay on population there and the tragedy of the commons was a guy named Garrett Hardin. Now, at the time that he wrote the essay, he was talking about rangeland management, okay? And he was talking about controlling overgrazing, okay? And that gave us the tragedy of the commons. Okay, good. I see a definition here, using too much finite resources before it can recharge. Very good. That's the tragedy of the commons, and overexploitation of resources. Now, there are 2 commons still in the world today. We still consider the oceans a global commons, and we consider the atmosphere a common, okay? And so this whole population growth and resource availability, we're still going to run up against some limiting factors, okay? We're not out of the woods, so to speak, okay? All right, we talked about green revolution, limiting factors. All right, density dependent and density independent. All right, so with density dependency, that's how dense the population is, okay? The number of individuals per square kilometer or square meter. And then density independent, again, it doesn't matter how many people there are per square meter, okay? So in your all's chat box, I want you to list some density independent, because we can all come up with density dependent limiting factors, but it's tougher for students to come up with the density independent limiting factors. All right, so I see good. Natural disasters, good. Tornado, weather events, good. Okay. Anything else? All right, I'm going to give you, let's see, Lou will go with a poll here. A is true, B is false. Humans. Are humans density independent limiting factors? A is true, B is false. So Lou's going to get a poll for us.
We should see the poll now. Can you see it?
I don't see anything yet, but maybe I'm not supposed to.
It says that these are now viewing questions. It looks like the polling may not be working, Rob. So
okay,
enter this in the chat room, and I'll just
all right, yeah.
we've got about 5 or 7 minutes to go for the hour, and
okay, cool.
We're all doing terrific. So
yeah. All right, so in the chat box, tell me, oh, there it is. A is true, B is false. Are humans density independent limiting factors. So we're getting a split.
So it's like the political races here. I don't want to go there.
Right. All right, as you guys kind of finalize your answers there, I'm going to give you an example. If I were to go fishing, I like to go fishing. My dad loves fishing, and I go fishing. All right. Am I going to limit the population of the fish in the pond or lake or wherever I go? Yes, I'm going to catch them. Okay. So does it matter? Did it matter how many fish were in the pond or how many fish were in the lake? And that answer would be no, it really doesn't matter. So I become a density independent limiting factor. And that's really oftentimes the case. We tend to be independent limiting factors because of our resource consumption, our habitat destruction, our air pollution. We end up becoming density independent limiting factor. The reason I tell you that is it doesn't really matter how many individuals that you can talk about, or, when it still comes down to resource consumption, we end up being density independent limiting factors. All right. So there were 9 content bullets for the human population unit. So this is 6, and there's really not much that can do that you haven't probably already been taught with age structure diagrams. We have the 3 most common results. We have Rwanda here, a developing country. You can see the wide base, and that's going to lead to population growth. We see Germany with somewhat of an inverted pyramid. So they're going to experience some decrease in population growth. And then we have 0, ZPG, our United States, where you're seeing population growth that's under control. It's at the replacement level fertility. And we're going to talk about those terms here in a second too, okay? All right. The 7th content bullet there in the unit was total fertility rate. So what factors other than resource availability can play a major role in the total fertility rate of a country? So in the chat box, I want you to write down a couple of things that may play a role other than resource availability in the fertility rate of a country. So we're in the chat box still. And type in what are some other factors that can play a major role in the fertility rate other than resource availability. Education, good. What else? Culture, medicine, okay? Well, willingness. Oh, thank you for clearing that up, Stephanie. All right, healthcare, birth control, availability, the role of women, so civil rights, social pressure, I should say gender rights. All right, good. So those are some other big factors that can play into total fertility rate. I know you guys know what total fertility rate is. Just to repeat it, it's the number of children a female can expect to have in her reproductive years. And so if we back up, remember the cohort of group that are our reproductive cohort. So that's from 15 up here to 40. That's our reproductive cohort, okay? If you're below 15, you're pre-reproductive. You're above 15, you're reproductive. And then above 40, you're post-reproductive. And so we look over here at Germany, the reason they're seeing a decline is because the majority of their population is post-reproductive, okay? The reason you're seeing a growth spike in Rwanda here is because the majority of their population is pre-reproductive or reproductive. And that leads us to this term fecundity. Now, I was looking in the chat box, is willingness, okay? And so that plays a little bit here with the term fecundity. It is the ability to reproduce. It doesn't mean that the population is reproducing, but the ability that they could reproduce. And that plays a role. That plays a role in not just human population, that also plays a role in organisms, okay? And then RLF is replacement level fertility. All right, so equations. I don't know what kind of equation, if they're going to give you any equation. I think you definitely will get some sort of equation on this exam this year, because I think that you can, you know, vary variables, you can change numbers and make questions unique. So you definitely, you know, have a lot of wiggle room in the exam making. But this is the equation for population growth. You have birth plus immigration minus death plus immigration, and you divide all of that by total population, and you're going to get a growth rate. If you multiply that by 100, you're going to get a percentage growth rate, okay? And so we often see our population growth rate in the terms of CBR and CDR, and where those stand for crude birth rate versus, sorry, that's supposed to be versus crude death rate. Crude refers to individuals per 1,000. So that equation confuses students because it looks like this one. The reason that equation confuses you is because they've already factored in the 100. Okay, so if I go back here and I take this thing here and I multiply it by 100, that's already been factored in here. Okay, so if I exit out and I go back to our good old Microsoft Paint here and I delete some stuff, okay, and I get a text box here and we say, you know, birth B plus, whoops, B plus I minus D plus E. I'll put those in parentheses for you. Right? If we do that, and that whole thing, right, that whole thing is divided by oh, sorry about that.
Ron, we better make this the last comment here. We're running right against the time clock.
Oh, we are? Okay. Well, they've already factored in that, that 100. Okay. And I've got some practice problems for you guys on here. I don't know, like maybe we can share it with them or something like that.
Well, if you'll send it to me, we'll put them on the Kentucky AP website and the teachers and students can download them directly.
Okay. And then there's the rule of 70 here, where 70 divided by that growth rate percentage gives us the years. And then the last thing that was on there is demographic transition, which I think the kids are going to know pretty well. And then I put some population and policy on there. Well, what we got here? Chat box. Another Zoom at 12. Sorry, Leslie. You can always email me, Leslie.
Well, I think this was terrific, Rob. Thank you, students. I think I apologize for the polling. I don't know why it worked sometimes and why it didn't, but that you guys, of all the Zooms we've had, this has been the most active chat box I've seen, and I want to thank everyone. There will be more information, or this will be posted, and the download of this session will be available. And thank you so much. Any final
Thanks, guys.
Rob?
Yeah, hey, good luck, guys.
Yeah, we'll see you again. I'm going to sign off now. Stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye now.